My dear child. Pause for a moment and listen carefully, because what you are about to hear did not arrive by accident. Out of all the moments in your day, out of all the messages that could have crossed your path, this one found you for a reason. There is something unfolding behind the scenes that you have not fully seen yet. Something has been building quietly, patiently, almost invisibly. And today, a piece of that hidden story is finally coming into the light. Don't skip. Because what happened was not expected by anyone. For a long time, you believed that the people around your person saw you only from a distance. You assumed they formed opinions based on fragments, assumptions, second-hand stories, and incomplete impressions. You never imagined that someone very close to them was paying far more attention than anyone realized. Their brother. Not because he was looking for answers. Not because he was searching for reasons. But because something about you kept appearing in conversations, in memories, in moments that seemed small at first but refused to disappear. At the beginning, he said very little. He listened. He observed. He watched how your name appeared in discussions when nobody expected it. He noticed how your person changed whenever you were mentioned. And slowly, without even intending to, he began putting together pieces of a picture that nobody else could fully see. Something huge is waiting for you. Because what he eventually understood surprised even him. There was one evening that seemed completely ordinary. Nothing dramatic happened. Nobody planned a serious discussion. Nobody expected a revelation. Yet sometimes the biggest truths arrive during the most ordinary moments. Your person's family was talking. Stories were being shared. Memories were being exchanged. People laughed. People reflected. People mentioned different names. Different experiences. Different chapters. And then suddenly your name entered the conversation. The room shifted. Not in an obvious way. Not in a dramatic way. But enough for someone paying attention to notice. Their brother noticed. He noticed how quickly the atmosphere changed. He noticed how certain faces softened. He noticed how your person became quieter. And he noticed something else. Something that nobody realized he had seen. Your person's eyes. Because eyes often reveal what words try to hide. And what he saw in that moment stayed with him. Long after the conversation ended. Long after everyone moved on. Long after the room became silent. He kept thinking about it. Why did that reaction seem different? Why did your name create such a powerful response? Why did it feel as though an invisible story existed beneath the surface? He didn't have answers then. But the questions remained. Stay till the end. Because those questions eventually led him somewhere nobody expected. Days passed. Weeks passed. Life continued. Yet every now and then your name surfaced again. And every single time, he noticed the same thing. The reaction never changed. It never faded. It never disappeared. In fact, it seemed to become stronger. There were moments when your person tried to act unaffected. Moments when they tried to appear calm. Moments when they tried to move the conversation somewhere else. But their brother noticed what others missed. The pauses. The hesitation. The hidden smile. The way certain memories instantly returned. The way silence suddenly became meaningful. And little by little, a realization began forming inside him. What he was witnessing was not ordinary. It was not casual. It was not temporary. Something deeper was happening. Something much deeper. But even then, he kept his thoughts to himself. He didn't share them. He didn't announce them. He simply continued watching. Because sometimes the truth becomes clearer when you stop chasing it and allow it to reveal itself naturally. Then came a moment that changed everything. A moment so simple that most people would have overlooked it completely. Yet it became impossible for him to ignore. Your person was speaking about future plans. Nothing unusual. Nothing emotional. Nothing dramatic. Just ordinary plans. Ordinary thoughts. Ordinary possibilities. But then your name appeared again. And something happened. For just a few seconds, the future they described seemed to include you without them even realizing it. Not intentionally. Not directly. But naturally. As though your presence already existed inside the vision they carried. Their brother heard it immediately. And suddenly all the pieces he had been collecting started connecting. The conversations. The reactions. The memories. The expressions. The pauses. The smiles. The silence. Everything. One by one. Like pieces of a puzzle finally finding their place. And in that moment, he realized something that nobody expected him to realize. You were far more important than anyone knew. Even perhaps more important than your person had admitted aloud. Something huge is waiting for you. Because that realization did not stay inside him forever. There came a day when he finally spoke. Not because someone forced him. Not because anyone asked. But because keeping it to himself no longer felt possible. The opportunity appeared unexpectedly. A discussion started. People shared opinions. Different perspectives filled the room. And eventually the conversation turned toward you once again. At first, he remained quiet. Listening. Observing. Thinking. Exactly as he always had. But then someone said something that caused him to finally speak. Nobody expected it. Nobody saw it coming. The room became still. And then he shared what he truly thought. Not what others wanted to hear. Not what anyone expected him to say. The truth. His truth. The conclusion he had reached after months of silent observation. And the moment those words left his mouth, everything changed. Because he didn't talk about your appearance. He didn't talk about surface-level things. He didn't talk about temporary qualities. Instead, he spoke about something far deeper. He said that every time your name appeared, something in your person changed. He said he had never seen consistency like that before. He said feelings come and go. Interests come and go. Excitement comes and goes. But what he witnessed never disappeared. No matter how much time passed. No matter what happened. No matter how many distractions appeared. Your presence remained. And according to him, that meant something. Something important. Something real. The room became silent. Nobody interrupted. Nobody laughed. Nobody changed the subject. Because everyone realized he wasn't speaking casually. He was speaking from months of observation. Months of paying attention. Months of seeing what others overlooked. And then he said something that surprised everyone. Including your person. He said, "I think this is bigger than anyone here realizes." The moment those words entered the room, everything shifted. Because suddenly everyone understood that he wasn't describing a passing chapter. He wasn't describing a temporary connection. He wasn't describing a random coincidence. He was describing something that had continued growing quietly beneath the surface for far longer than anyone knew. And when your person heard those words, they didn't argue. They didn't dismiss them. They didn't reject them. Instead, they became silent. A silence that said more than any explanation ever could. And that silence became the answer nobody expected. What happened next would leave an even deeper impression on everyone present. Because for the first time, their brother wasn't the only one seeing the truth. Others started seeing it too. Little details. Little signs. Little moments. Things they had overlooked before suddenly became impossible to ignore. And as those realizations began spreading through the room, a completely unexpected understanding started forming. One that would eventually lead to a revelation far greater than anyone imagined. And when that revelation finally arrives, it will explain why your name continues appearing in places where nobody expected it. Because the story is not over. In many ways, it is only beginning. There was something unusual about the silence that followed. Not the kind of silence that comes from confusion, but the kind that appears when people suddenly realize they may have been looking at a situation the wrong way all along. Your person's brother had spoken honestly, and once those words were out in the open, nobody could pretend they had not heard them. The conversation moved on eventually, but something had changed. The atmosphere was different. The way people thought about you was different. And most importantly, the way your person reacted afterward was different. Don't skip, because what happened next was something nobody expected. For days after that conversation, their brother kept replaying everything in his mind. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that there was a much bigger story hidden beneath the surface. He started remembering moments he had almost forgotten. Small moments. Quiet moments. Moments that seemed meaningless at the time but now looked completely different. Every memory pointed to the same conclusion. Every observation led back to the same answer. And the answer was you. Something huge is waiting for you. One afternoon, while everyone was gathered together again, the topic returned unexpectedly. Nobody planned it. Nobody forced it. Yet somehow your name entered the discussion once more. This time, however, something was different. Instead of staying quiet, several people immediately remembered what the brother had said before. Suddenly they began connecting the same dots. One person remembered a conversation. Another remembered a reaction. Someone else remembered a moment when your person became unusually emotional after hearing something about you. Piece by piece, the evidence began stacking higher and higher. It felt almost impossible to ignore. Their brother sat there listening as everyone slowly reached the same realization he had reached weeks earlier. Stay till the end, because this is where the story takes a surprising turn. As everyone shared their observations, your person remained unusually quiet. They listened carefully. They heard every word. They watched every reaction. Yet they offered almost no explanation. And strangely enough, that silence became the loudest response in the room. Because if everything being said was wrong, it would have been easy to dismiss it. If everyone had misunderstood the situation, it would have been simple to correct them. But that did not happen. Instead, your person simply listened. Their brother noticed immediately. In fact, he noticed something nobody else did. Every time someone mentioned you, your person's expression changed slightly. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Just enough for someone observant to see it. And he saw it every single time. That was the moment his certainty became absolute. Something huge is waiting for you. Later that evening, after everyone else had gone home, a private conversation took place. A conversation nobody expected to happen. It was just your person and their brother. No audience. No distractions. No interruptions. For a few minutes they talked about ordinary things. Then the brother finally brought up the subject directly. He asked a simple question. A question he had wanted to ask for a very long time. And when he asked it, the room became quiet. The question was not complicated. It was not dramatic. Yet it carried enormous weight. Because it forced your person to face something they had been avoiding for a long time. The brother waited patiently. Seconds passed. Then finally, an answer came. It was not a long answer. It was not a speech. But it revealed more than anyone expected. The answer confirmed what he had suspected all along. The feelings connected to you were not temporary. They were not fading. They were not disappearing. In fact, they had become stronger with time. Stronger through distance. Stronger through uncertainty. Stronger through every attempt to move on. The brother could hardly believe it. Not because he doubted the feelings existed, but because of how deeply they had grown. Don't skip. Something huge is waiting for you. After that conversation, everything made sense. Every strange reaction. Every meaningful silence. Every hidden smile. Every unexplained emotional moment. The puzzle was finally complete. And yet the biggest surprise was still ahead. Because the brother began noticing something new. Whenever future plans were discussed, your presence appeared naturally within them. Not intentionally. Not directly. But naturally. As if somewhere deep inside, your person already saw you as part of the life they hoped to create. That realization hit him harder than anything else. Suddenly he understood why your name carried so much weight. Suddenly he understood why every conversation eventually seemed to lead back to you. Suddenly he understood why no matter how much time passed, the connection never seemed to weaken. And when he understood that truth, he stopped viewing you as just another chapter in the story. He started seeing you as someone who had quietly become part of the future itself. Stay till the end. Because what happens next changes everything. Over the following days, the brother found himself paying attention more closely than ever before. And the more he observed, the more evidence appeared. Sometimes it came through conversations. Sometimes through memories. Sometimes through unexpected moments when nobody thought they were being watched. Every observation pointed in the same direction. Every sign repeated the same message. The connection was real. It was deeper than anyone had realized. And now even other family members were beginning to notice it. The realization spread slowly at first. Then faster. Soon people who had never paid attention before were seeing the same patterns. They were asking the same questions. They were reaching the same conclusions. And each new realization added another piece to a truth that was becoming impossible to ignore. Their brother eventually reached one final conclusion. A conclusion that surprised even him. He realized that the reason nobody expected his thoughts about you to be so positive was because they underestimated what he had been observing all along. They assumed he knew very little. They assumed he was not paying attention. But in reality, he had been watching the story unfold from the beginning. He had seen the changes. He had seen the growth. He had seen the emotions nobody talked about. And now he understood something that many others still had not fully realized. Your impact was far greater than anyone imagined. And as this understanding continued spreading, a new chapter quietly began opening behind the scenes. A chapter that would soon reveal something even more surprising about what your person truly wanted for the future. And when that revelation finally appears, the reaction of their brother may become the most important part of the entire story. A strange feeling began spreading through the family after that. It was not confusion. It was not surprise anymore. It was recognition. The kind of recognition that arrives when people finally see something that had been sitting in front of them the entire time. Your person's brother could feel it happening. One by one, people were beginning to understand why he had spoken so confidently before. They were starting to notice the same things he had noticed. The same patterns. The same reactions. The same unmistakable connection. And the more they paid attention, the more obvious it became. Don't skip. Because what happened next was the moment that changed everything. One evening, during another family gathering, a simple question appeared out of nowhere. Nobody planned it. Nobody expected it. Yet somehow it became the most important question anyone had asked in months. The conversation had been moving normally until someone casually mentioned future goals, future plans, and future dreams. People started sharing their thoughts. Some spoke about careers. Some spoke about places they wanted to visit. Others talked about achievements they hoped to accomplish. Then suddenly the conversation shifted toward relationships and meaningful connections. The room grew quieter. Not because anyone was uncomfortable, but because everyone became interested. They wanted to hear what others truly thought. And then someone looked directly at your person. The question was simple. But its impact was enormous. Everyone waited for the answer. Their brother waited too. Something huge is waiting for you. Because before your person even spoke, something unexpected happened. A smile appeared. It was small. Almost invisible. Yet their brother noticed it instantly. He had become too familiar with these reactions to miss them now. And the moment he saw that smile, he already knew what was coming next. The answer that followed was careful. Thoughtful. Measured. Yet hidden inside those words was a truth nobody could ignore. Your person spoke about wanting something genuine. Something meaningful. Something lasting. Something that could continue growing over time. And while your name was never mentioned directly in that answer, everyone in the room knew exactly who they were thinking about. The silence afterward confirmed it. Their brother looked around and realized he was not the only one who understood. Others had reached the same conclusion. Others had connected the same dots. The realization was spreading faster than ever before. Stay till the end. Because the biggest revelation had not arrived yet. Later that night, after most of the conversations had ended, your person's brother found himself reflecting on everything once again. He remembered the first time he had heard your name. He remembered the first unusual reaction he had witnessed. He remembered the first moment he suspected there was more to the story than anyone realized. Looking back, he could see how every single event had led to this point. Every clue had mattered. Every detail had mattered. Every observation had mattered. And now the picture was finally becoming complete. But then something happened that he never expected. A family member approached him privately and asked a question. A question that completely caught him off guard. They wanted to know why he seemed so certain whenever he talked about you. They wanted to know what exactly he had seen. And for the first time, he explained everything. He described the reactions. He described the expressions. He described the consistency. He described how your presence seemed to remain important regardless of time, distance, or circumstances. The more he explained, the quieter the listener became. Because suddenly they understood. Suddenly they could see what he had been seeing all along. Don't skip. Something huge is waiting for you. The next few days brought an even bigger surprise. Word of those conversations quietly spread through the family. Not as gossip. Not as rumors. Simply as observations. Honest observations. And with every new conversation, the same conclusion appeared again and again. Your impact had been impossible to ignore. People who rarely paid attention before were suddenly noticing things. They were remembering old conversations. They were recalling forgotten moments. They were piecing together memories that now seemed important. And every path led back to the same place. You. It reached a point where even your person's brother was amazed. He had expected people to understand eventually. He had not expected them to understand this quickly. The truth was becoming visible to everyone. And the more visible it became, the harder it became to pretend it wasn't there. Something huge is waiting for you. Then came the moment nobody expected. A moment so simple that it almost passed unnoticed. Yet it became one of the most important moments of all. Your person was looking through old memories. Old photos. Old conversations. Old reminders of different chapters in life. Their brother happened to be nearby. What happened next lasted only a few seconds. Yet those few seconds told him everything he needed to know. Because when your presence appeared among those memories, the reaction was immediate. Genuine. Natural. Unfiltered. There was no audience. No reason to perform. No reason to hide. And that is exactly why the moment mattered so much. It revealed the truth in its purest form. Their brother saw it clearly. The smile. The reflection. The emotion. The unmistakable significance. And at that moment, any remaining doubt disappeared forever. Stay till the end. Because this revelation leads directly into something even bigger. From that day forward, the brother stopped wondering whether you mattered. He stopped questioning whether the connection was real. Those questions no longer existed. Instead, he started wondering something else entirely. He began wondering what would happen when everything finally became clear. What would happen when conversations became honest? What would happen when hidden feelings no longer remained hidden? What would happen when all the pieces finally came together? Those questions stayed with him. And surprisingly, they seemed to stay with your person as well. Because lately, something had been changing. The hesitation that once existed was becoming smaller. The uncertainty that once existed was becoming weaker. The future that once seemed distant was becoming easier to imagine. Their brother noticed every bit of it. And because he noticed it, he reached a conclusion that nobody expected him to reach. He believed the story was moving towards something important. Something meaningful. Something that could change everything. Not tomorrow. Not instantly. But gradually. Naturally. Inevitably. The signs were becoming impossible to miss. The pieces were aligning. The understanding was growing. And somewhere behind the scenes, a new chapter was already beginning to unfold. A chapter that would soon reveal why your person's brother became one of the strongest voices supporting this connection. And when that truth finally comes into the light, it may explain why he shared his true thoughts about you in the first place, because deep down, he had already seen a future that others were only beginning to recognize. Sometimes the most important realization does not arrive through a grand event. Sometimes it arrives through a series of quiet moments that slowly become impossible to ignore. That is exactly what was happening now. Your person's brother had already shared his true thoughts, but what surprised everyone was what happened afterward. Instead of fading away, his words became stronger with time. The more people reflected on them, the more accurate they seemed. The more they observed, the more they understood. And soon, something remarkable began happening. People were no longer asking whether you mattered. They were asking how long this story had been unfolding without anyone noticing. Don't skip. Because what happened next shocked even the people closest to your person. One evening, during a completely ordinary conversation, someone brought up an old memory. It was not supposed to be significant. It was simply a story from the past. Yet hidden inside that memory was something nobody had recognized before. As the story unfolded, everyone suddenly realized that your name had been appearing far longer than they remembered. Years of conversations. Months of small moments. Countless tiny reminders. They had all been there. Nobody had connected them before. But now they could see the pattern clearly. It was like finding a hidden picture that had been sitting in plain sight all along. The room became quiet as everyone processed what they were discovering. Their brother sat back and watched the realization spread from person to person. He had suspected it for a long time. Now everyone else was catching up. Something huge is waiting for you. Because the biggest surprise was not the history itself. The biggest surprise was the consistency. Through changes. Through distractions. Through different chapters of life. One thing had remained remarkably steady. The significance of you. That realization stayed with everyone. It became impossible to forget. In fact, it started changing the way people talked about the future. Instead of speaking in general terms, they began noticing how often your presence naturally fit into future discussions. Nobody forced it. Nobody planned it. It simply happened. And every time it happened, your person's brother noticed. Every single time. Stay till the end. Because this leads directly to the moment that changed his perspective forever. A few days later, he found himself having another private conversation with your person. This conversation was different from the others. There was no audience. No family gathering. No outside opinions. Just honesty. The kind of honesty that appears when people stop trying to explain things and simply speak from the heart. At first they talked about ordinary life. Then the conversation drifted toward dreams, goals, and future possibilities. And that was when something unexpected happened. Your person began describing a future they hoped to build. Not every detail. Not every step. Just a vision. A feeling. A direction. Their brother listened carefully. The more he listened, the more one realization became impossible to ignore. The future being described sounded strangely familiar. Familiar because it matched everything he had observed over the past months. Familiar because it reflected every conclusion he had already reached. Familiar because somewhere within that vision, your presence seemed to exist naturally. Not forced. Not imagined. Natural. And that was the moment everything finally clicked. Don't skip. Something huge is waiting for you. Their brother walked away from that conversation with complete clarity. For the first time, he understood why he had felt so strongly about sharing his thoughts in the first place. It was never about convincing anyone. It was never about influencing anyone. It was simply because the truth had become too obvious to ignore. He had witnessed something real. He had watched it grow. He had watched it survive uncertainty. He had watched it remain important despite time passing. And now he understood that what he had been observing was not temporary at all. The realization felt bigger than he expected. Bigger because it explained every strange moment from the past. Bigger because it connected every piece of the story together. Bigger because it revealed that the connection was far stronger than anyone initially believed. Meanwhile, others were beginning to reach the same conclusion. Family members who once paid little attention were suddenly noticing everything. They were remembering conversations from months ago. They were recalling details they had forgotten. They were recognizing patterns they had overlooked. And every new realization pointed toward the same truth. Something huge is waiting for you. Then came the moment nobody saw coming. A family member who had always remained neutral finally spoke up. This was someone who rarely shared opinions. Someone who preferred listening over speaking. Yet after hearing everything, after observing everything, they finally said something that stopped everyone in their tracks. They admitted that they agreed with the brother completely. The room became silent. Not because people were shocked by the opinion itself, but because of who was expressing it. If even the quietest observer had reached the same conclusion, then perhaps the signs really were as obvious as they appeared. That moment changed everything. Suddenly the brother was no longer the only person speaking positively about what he had observed. Others were beginning to say the same things. Others were reaching the same understanding. Others were recognizing the same truth. Stay till the end. Because the final realization was still approaching. Over the next few weeks, something remarkable happened. The conversations became less about questions and more about certainty. Less about wondering and more about understanding. The uncertainty that once surrounded the situation slowly disappeared. Piece by piece. Day by day. Observation by observation. Until eventually one reality stood above all the others. Your presence had left an impact that could not be erased. An impact that continued growing even when nobody was paying attention. An impact that remained visible through every season of the story. And your person's brother knew it better than anyone. Because he had been watching from the beginning. He had seen the smallest details. He had witnessed the moments nobody else noticed. He had collected the pieces long before others realized there was a puzzle to solve. That is why his true thoughts surprised everyone. Not because they were random. Not because they were exaggerated. But because they came from months of careful observation. From moments most people never saw. From truths that revealed themselves slowly over time. And now, as the story continues moving forward, one final chapter is beginning to take shape behind the scenes. A chapter that may reveal why your person's brother became so certain about you in the first place. Because the more he watched, the more he became convinced that this connection was not just another passing chapter. It was something far more meaningful. Something far more lasting. And very soon, a revelation will emerge that could explain why he believed that from the very beginning.